Hello, everyone. The CDM training team would like to welcome you to this lunchtime offering of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency 4-hour course with hands-on labs, CDM 201, Identity and Access Management within the CDM Agency Dashboard. My name is Joe Bukovac, and I am part of the Cyber Defense and Education branch of the CISA Cybersecurity Division as the CDM Dashboard Training Team Lead. Today, the training goal is to provide you with the basics of CDM and the identity and access management capabilities using the CDM dashboard to help mitigate agency threats and provide your agency with improved cybersecurity. You'll be provided with numerous CDM resources, references, and lab scenarios so you can maintain your skills in this changing environment. Now, before we get started, I would like to introduce today's instructors and then share some disclaimers. Today, we have Adrian and Mike as our instructors. Both work for Motorola Solutions and support the CDM training effort. Mike Jansen has more than 20 years of experience in the field of cybersecurity. He is retired from the United States Air Force and has supported CDM and various DHS and CISA training and awareness programs for nearly 10 years. Adrian Shepard has nearly 20 years of experience in the cybersecurity field, including 8 years supporting CDM. For many years, Adrian has supported the DoD community and United States government's efforts in cyber defense. Adrian has served in the United States Air Force and is a retired cyber protection team member. Now, a few disclaimers before we get started. Thanks again for attending. It is now time to begin our journey into identity and access management. And I would like to introduce Mr. Mike Jansen, who will begin today's presentation.
Thank you, Joe, and welcome everybody. Thanks for attending our course today. So we'll begin with an overview of the 4 security capabilities when it comes to IdAM. So that's trust, behave, CRED, and PRIV. CRED being for credential and PRIV for privileges. Then we'll have an in-depth look at each of those capabilities. We'll be looking at some other fundamental IdAM concepts like zero trust and identity lifecycle management. As you know, as a cybersecurity professional, though, you'll be working with the dashboard to support your agency's policies and procedures. And we suspect you'll find deficiencies and anomalies as you progress, right? But when things come up, you need to know what to do. You know, who will you report to? What will you recommend? What's the time frame for remediation? All those questions we have, and that's what the CDM dashboard is going to help provide you. It's going to give you a lot of information about your cybersecurity status, and we want to, use that information to the fullest. So keep in mind as we go through the material today, just kind of in the back of your mind, this is one of the things we like to kind of have you thinking about is the who, what, when, why, as we're doing this, especially in terms of kind of remediation process, how we're going to fix these problems. With that, we have 5 labs today, but depending on the time, we may only get through 4, but I think we should be fine to get through all 5. And then once we finish the labs, we'll conclude with some information on some additional resources and give you a chance to give us some feedback on the course today. Let us know what you think and if there's ideas that you have on how we can improve for future iterations. So yeah, thanks for that. All right, our first topic today is just to give you an overview. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to my co-instructor, Adrian, to get us started with it. So over to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Mike. And so I will be the other instructor delivering this course for you today. And so what we're going to do now is start by taking a look at some of the basic concepts associated with the identity and access management security capabilities. Now, for some people, this graphic that you see on the screen may be new, and we'll briefly talk about it. But for other individuals that may be familiar with the CDM experience, or if you've been to one of our other courses, you may remember where the graphic you see on the screen, it had a red ring or the asset management ring on it. And so the rings or layers denote all the different CDM capabilities. Now, before you can have real security at the core, which is data protection management, you first have to address the outer layers. And now, as you can see, the requirement after asset management is identity and access management. And then this includes things like user account maintenance, being able to vet those individuals, and then privileges that have been assigned to these users. Not only do you have to know what is on your network, so you have an inventory of all the assets, you have to know who is assessing your systems and the information, and ensure those users are authorized to have that information. So as I mentioned, who is on the network? And so we want to make sure that everybody's speaking the same lingo. And so I'm going to cover some terminology, and then we'll give you an analogy to exemplify some of the ideas that are concepts associated with this today's course. So much like the slide says or states who is on the network, we have to trust them and give them access to what they need to do their job. We also have to know what they're doing and hold them accountable for their actions. Now notice all these capabilities revolve around the user and are dependent upon each other. And so while they each have their own function, the user remains the center or the central figure. Now, in regards to terms, when we're talking about user, this is a generic term that applies to any entity, including non-person entities, that they may access any resource, physical or logical. Next, we have trust, and trust is used to validate a person's identity and the degree to which they have been vetted. Next, we have CRED, and this is a digital representation of a user's that's used to grant physical or logical access. It binds a type of credential or authentication mechanism to identify or actually identity established in trust with an authenticator assurance level. And we'll talk about what they refer to as AAL a little later to kind of provide some context to that. And that's just AAL is authenticator assurance level. Next, we have PRIV, and this establishes the privileges associated with the credential and in turn the individual or service. Currently, the focus of PRIV refers to high privileged administrator accounts and not end users. And then lastly, we have behave. And so this identifies that the individual has the proper knowledge and training for the roles they are assigned and that they remain up to date. And so we all take part in behave. And as you go today's course, we'll figure out what type of training that we're required to do to meet those requirements. And so this covers the basic definitions for the 4 capabilities. So now what I'm going to do is provide some context to the this information. All right, so let's think about this. So if I give you an example or the analogy of, I'm sure with the 20 to 30 people in today's course, at some point in time in your life, you've had someone come to your house to fix something, right? You know, whether that be a sink, maybe even an appliance, plumbing, something, someone has come to your house to repair something. Now, how do you trust that individual? How would you trust them? So let's just say if you need someone coming to your house, how would you trust them? Or do you just let everyone into your house? And you can respond, yep, there we go. Employee badge, okay. So they have the creds. Right time and right place, okay. So you know what time they should be coming. They give you some type of window. Expected arrival, okay. Uniform. What about word of mouth? Have you ever asked maybe one of your neighbors or one of your friends, hey, you know, I need a plumber to come to the house or electrician to come to the house. Do you, can you recommend someone? Right? Because if you trust your neighbor or if you trust your friend, you figure if they will let them come to their house to fix their items, you should have no problem with that as well, right? So maybe you use word of mouth. What's the one list they used to have? I don't know if people still use it. Angie's List, maybe, right? You have a reputable list of people providing services and they're giving ratings to these individuals. Even on Google, you have Google reviews. I'm just kind of looking at check ID and knowing when they are coming. All right. And then one of the things that we used to use would be I don't know how many people are, kind of dating myself maybe here, but a telephone book, right? You go back to the telephone book and look at the ads in the telephone book and say, okay, these people look like they can cover a lot. They seem to be knowledgeable. I'm going to go based up on maybe their ad. It looks better. It's more appealing. So um, that may have been an angle as well. But some type of way you vetted them and to say, okay, I can let you come into my house. I'm trusting you that you know how to do this work. You wouldn't just pick somebody up that you see at the Lowe's and they have a hammer in their pocket and you pick them up to come do work in your house because you wouldn't trust the work. All right. So the moral of the story is before you have someone show up, you first have to figure out whether you trust them or not. Right. And so we talk about ways of how we would do that to vet those individuals. And so we talked about a friend, or maybe if they have a badge or some type of uniform, online reviews, some type of way, even the Better Business Bureau. And so finally you decide to trust the company or the individual, and you hire this individual. Now, how would the technician know how to behave while in your house or in your home? Do you provide requirements? I know for me, there's parts of my home that I have carpet in. And so I asked, hey, is there a way you can put the shoe covers on in those areas, or take off your shoes, please, in those areas? And so those are things that I inform them about. Right? Do they come into your house, do some work, and then leave a mess? No, they should clean up after themselves. So these are the things that you watch for. They come in and you see them coming in and they drink beer while they're doing work. That's probably a big no-no for most people. And so those set off red alarms, some red flags, and say, okay, you know what? I don't think I want to use you, and you're not behaving correctly in my home. And so there's some type of expectations. There you go. Goals to provide top customer service. Employers' expectations as well, right? You want to make sure they're insured. And so we have some type of standard that we want them to use and expectations as they're providing services in your home, because this is your home that you want them to do, and you expect them to take care of it. And so this is where we talk about behave. And so the company wants to, we want to make sure they follow standards. And, are they required to cover the floor before they start working? I think in the case of like a painter, do they just come in, they don't cover anything up, they don't put the blue tape down to outline areas that don't need to be painted, and they just go to work and start painting the whole wall, and they get paint everywhere, and then they leave. And so once again, you have to outline those statements or those standards as a homeowner. Now next, would you give them creds to your home? Let's say if you're not going to be there and there's an alarm system, do you give them the access to the keypad or give them the alarm code and say, hey, I'm not going to be there, but just go ahead and go in? Looks like we're all in the same accord here. No. Excuse me. Yep, someone was always there. Looks like we're all in agreement there. No. And that's totally understandable. You usually want to schedule it when you're scheduling the service. That, hey, so I'll be home from 1 to 4. Come in between that window of opportunity to come fix this. Anything outside of that, we'll have to schedule for another day. Hard pass. Because you don't trust them to that level in many cases. Now, if you probably work with them, or if it's someone that you have a relationship with, you may say, hey, you know what, I trust them. Maybe give them a temporary code to get into your house. I don't know. But most cases, you're probably going to be, no, I'll be there because I want to see the work you're doing, and I don't trust you with my home like that. And so, you got to think about how would they access your home. What kind of, if they have any keys or codes to the door. And I think many of us have said we probably won't give them that. And so, but these are things that you have to think about when you're providing creds to the premises. Now, the next thing, how would you allow them the PRIV to go anywhere in your house? Would they have privileges to every area, or are they isolated to only, let's say if they're working in the bathroom, this is all you need to have access to? Or do you just say, hey, go ahead and do whatever you need to do. I'll be in this other room if you need to go to the bathroom. Isolated. Okay, isolated. Introduce them to the areas they need to work in. All right, so you walk them to that area, almost like an escort, right? Hey, this is the area you need to be in. Let me know if you need to leave. Make me aware if you're going in and out the house, things like that, because maybe they have to go back out to get tools. All right, and so I think these are all the responses that I'm seeing in the chat are relevant. Go to where the item needs needs to be worked on. And isolation. Okay. All right. And so when we're thinking about that, that's in regards to privileges. And so you can think about that as well as what on networks. Do you get access to everything on the network? When you go to when you're working at your agency, no, they usually isolate you to certain areas. And so when you're thinking about that, keep that in mind. And so hopefully the analogy of the technician or whatever the service tech is helps make the 4 security capabilities a little clearer. And as we go through today's course, think about that when we're talking about these terms, whether it be PRIV, CRED, behave, or even trust. Think about that analogy because I think it'll be very helpful as we go through the remaining of today's class. All right. So now that analogy is out the way, thank you for participating. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and pass things back over to Mike.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, it's a good analogy, something we can all relate to. I was sitting here thinking, what happens when you hire the plumber and he charges you $500 for an hour's work? Was that robbery? Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, our next topic we're going to talk to is the introduction. So, Adrian talked about trust. So there should be a specified degree of trust that can be granted to a user. Examples might include, security classifications, in our line of work, right? We got confidential, secret, top secret, maybe even NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. Or maybe they're, it's read on or read in for access to specific sensitive data. A lot of government agencies are going to require some type of clearance, and those trust levels are or need to be revalidated on a periodic basis most of the time, whether it's someone with a top secret clearance or someone with that simple NDA. There has to be some level of vetting or trust for those system users. What you see here, the sentences that are in the boxes are basic policy statements that you probably, I'm guessing that your agency probably has in their policy documents. Really, the idea is to get you thinking about your agency's documents regarding some of these access policies. So where does an agency get this trust information? Your agency should have some type of system, process, or procedure to vet each user. Trust information probably comes from some type of security database, or it may come from the security officer, maybe HR typically, or even some other agency. But the key is that a user should be cleared through the agency's process before they're given access. In the earlier analogy from Adrian, you hope that the company hires reputable repair people, or the individual hires, a reputable repair company or person, and that company is actually doing the background checks of the people that they hire. You might also hire a company that's, licensed, bonded, insured, etc. Just to help for peace of mind there. But all of these items increase your level of trust in the technician that you let into your home. Is it possible you're still going to have issues? Sure, but it's about kind of reducing that risk. All right, so next we have behave. And so in our analogy, right, that we had, in order to have the technician follow your rules, you have to tell them the specifics about how you want them to act in your house. The same is true with identity and access management. What type of training is required at your agency? For example, FSMA requires cybersecurity and role-based training every 3 years. We have a lot of annual training that we do as well. We have to train users how to act on the network, how to use the systems and information, and to let them know that there's consequences if they don't follow those rules. But just like with the trust slide, we have a policy-like statement about users completing their mandatory training. The slide says validated on a periodic basis. Well, what is that period at your agency? And every agency might have, might be a little different. Do you take the same training time after time? Or do you vary that training? Anyway, again, that's something that your agency will have in their policy or should have that addresses those requirements. Most, if not all, agencies perform, as mentioned, some type of annual cybersecurity refresher training that must be taken to keep that account active. If you don't take that training, then they should disable the account. And that can be tracked in a number of ways. Usually there's a reminder of some sort that lets you know that, hey, your annual training's due. And I'm sure your training managers and supervisors are tracking it and keeping on top of it too. And then there's ways it can be enforced as well. So again, if you don't do the training, then no more access. But give me a thumbs up if your agency tracks your mandatory training, like the CST, cybersecurity awareness training, or maybe you got some phishing training or something like that. I'm pretty sure everybody does, but awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think party horn. But revalidating, training should be a policy at each agency. How that, how is that policy supported? Kind of is the question. Where is the data kept? Does your agency have a LMS or learning management system? Someone somewhere is tracking the training and the retraining. But again, it all comes down to policy, and hopefully that's being done. And that's where, all this, the CDM dashboard is going to help with all this. All right, so on to the CREDs. As we had that diagram early on, these security capabilities are all interrelated. The concentric circle that Adrian showed with the green. So credentials are like, keys to the system. Credentials are something something you have, or something you are. For example, PIV cards, something you have. Biometrics, that's something you are. Security codes, hard tokens, something you have. Multi-factor authentication with a PIV card definitely has its benefits, right? Such as high identity assurance. But it also mitigates things like replay attacks and weak passwords. So keep that in mind, and it depends on what, the level depends on what type of system and what kind of information you're trying to protect. Now, kind of going back to our technician scenario, before you give out those keys, essentially that's the CRED part, right? You have to trust them. So trust, and then you have to determine which keys you want to give them, which is the PRIV. Also, once we establish someone's identity on a system, we can then monitor and hold them accountable. So if we can know who they are, can see when they accessed, or then we're able to hold them accountable. A common example of CRED also would be usernames and passwords. Right? We all use that, like we're using that today to access the CVLE later. But now all government agencies are required to have PIV cards for two-factor authentication, because that provides a little higher level of security than just the username and password by itself, right? But you know, there's other methods as well. You know, there's other things, soft tokens, for example, biometrics, like we just mentioned, sending the security codes. You know, there's a bunch of different ways, but all right. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Adrian to talk about the PRIV requirements.
All right, now if we go back to our technician scenario once again, you know, during that scenario, we asked if they would have the PRIV to go anywhere in the house, and everyone gave their responses of what they would do in that regard to, you know, isolate them. And so on the slide, at least on the slide, there's a policy, and it states that only authorized users, which in regards to the capability, we're talking about trust, with authorized accounts, and that's CRED and behave, are accessing the systems. Now, what we're talking about here is least privilege, or the need to know. And so all employees have only the privileges necessary to do their jobs, nothing more, right? We don't need to give them more than they need. And so now what I'm going to do is ask a question to see where agencies get their PRIV information. And so if you could respond in your chat panel, just like you've been doing throughout this course already, what person or office at your agency determines the privileges for a user? You don't need to give me the name, but if you can kind of get an idea of what office, even if it's just generic IT or security. Okay. Well, CIO. All right. CSO, security office. The information owner of the system. All right. Okay. So we have someone who owns their asset, and then the other aspect of it is more general, more of a security aspect. So good to know. So obviously, with each agency, there may be some variation. It really depends on your agency and the policies. And so the only wrong answer would be, as you probably guessed, the user. The users do not determine the privileges. And so the user should not be dictating what type of access they need. And so a real example that I've run into that pertains to PRIV deals with permissions that are extended to a user via a group. And so in many cases, the employee leaves or has taken a different position, but still remains part of the original security group. And so if that happens, hopefully there's some type of revalidation, right, of those users that are in this group. And so revalidating group members ensures that those who require access have it, and that least privilege and need to know are maintained. And then you're able to go through and do a sweep of those users and say, okay, this person is out processing, and that should be part of your out processing process policies. If that user no longer needs access to those systems, to go and clean that account or remove it, or whatever needs to be performed. Next, we're going to talk about user access. And so user access is the key part of security. So let's look at some of those details. First thing we're going to look at is some authenticator assurance levels, or what we refer to as AALs. And so advanced credentials like multi-factor authentication provide what was called authenticator assurance levels, or AALs. The agency dashboard, which we'll take a look at later, uses this to ensure agencies are using a high confidence factor to ensure someone's identity. Right. So the government has gone to the use of PIV cards, which many of us should be familiar with. And so that's a multi-factor authentication, or MFA, and this meets the AAL 3 requirement. User ID and passwords might be considered a level 1 requirement. For highly privileged users like system administrators, managers, or even executives, only AAL3 is appropriate, and so this requirement due to the access levels that are granted to these users. All right, so obviously more responsibilities, the higher the level required for those users. Identity and access management are key capabilities in managing risk no matter where the resources reside. With IdAM, the challenge has always been about least privilege. Moving forward, a new risk management model called Zero Trust captures the essence of that challenge. This is meant to ensure that all resources are securely accessed, regardless of where they are located. Least privilege should also be enforced, and network traffic should be inspected based on the applications that are required or need to for the users that need them. And so, in a Mary Talk survey in April of 2021, 100 federal and industry CDM stakeholders were asked about Zero Trust. Of that 100, 85% of the respondents said that a government-wide Zero Trust architecture is key to preventing future attacks. Along with that, 63% believe that CDM principles and deployments are very important to establishing a government-wide Zero Trust architecture. So they feel like with CDM, we're on the way, we're on that path of where we need to be for Zero Trust. And so, once again, that's why we're here today, to learn how the dashboard can help us in implementing some of these capabilities. Now, in regards to policy, in January 2022, M-22.09 was released. And this policy, which moves the federal enterprise to a Zero Trust architecture. And so the foundational tenet of the Zero Trust model is that no actor, system, network, or service operating outside or within the security perimeter is trusted. With that overall tenet, one must verify anything and everything. Trust nothing. Essentially is what that's saying. And so all traffic is encrypted, as defined in EO 14028, and users should log into applications, not networks, right? And so this shifts the emphasis to stronger enterprise identity and access controls. That memo or policy also states or requires that agencies be actively working toward a level of Zero Trust security by the end of fiscal year 2024. And so it's coming, or it's here. We can't stop that. So we have to have that mindset of this is where we're evolving to with new technology and ways to implement security. CISA's Zero Trust maturity model, or what's referred to as ZTMM, covers 5 distinct pillars in which minor advancements can be made over time toward optimization. The pillars depicted include identity, devices, networks, applications and workloads, and then lastly, data. And as you can see, the columns here are the pillars on the slide. Each pillar includes general details regarding the following cross-cutting capabilities. Let's see, we have visibility and analytics, automation and orchestration, and then governance. Each pillar can progress at its own pace and may progress more quickly than others until cross-pillar coordination is required. CISA's ZTMM is one of the many paths to support the transition to Zero Trust. Now, this is all a journey, as you can see in the title of the slide, but agencies should use the following guiding criteria of each stage to identify maturity for each Zero Trust technology pillar and provide consistency across the maturity model. So we go from, at the bottom here, we have traditional. So we're at the very bottom of that mountain. Traditional, manually configured life cycles. And so, and that includes an assignments of attributes. So we're talking about security and logging, things like static security policies and solutions that address one pillar at a time with discrete dependencies on external systems. We have least privilege established only at provisioning, things like manual response and mitigation deployment, and limited correlation of dependencies, logs, and telemetry data. And so that's the traditional aspect. Now the next stage is initial. Starting automation of attribute assignment and configuration of life cycles. You want a policy decision of external systems. Provide some type of responsive changes to least privilege after provisioning, and aggregated visibility for internal systems. Moving up to the next stage on the mountain, we have advance. And so whenever or wherever applicable, automated controls for lifecycle and assignment of configurations and policies with cross-pillar coordination, use of centralized visibility and identity control, maybe even a policy enforcement integrated across pillars and in response to predefined mitigations. Also things like changes to least privilege based on risk and posture assessments. And then lastly, you want to be able to, building toward enterprise-wide awareness, that to include externally hosted resources, especially in a dynamic environment that we now live in. We don't just have systems maintained on premise anymore, right? We have things that are hosted in the cloud, so we have to take that into account. Now, at the top of that mountain, where we get the flag, this is where we want to be. And so optimal, and we're talking about fully automated, just-in-time life cycles and assignments of attributes to assets and resources that self-report with dynamic policies based upon automated and observed triggers, right? So you dynamically provided that information. Dynamic least privilege access, so just enough and within thresholds for assets and their respective dependencies enterprise-wide. We want cross-pillar interoperability with continuous monitoring, and then centralized visibility with comprehensive situational awareness, right? So we want to take everything in. Obviously, you can see what the path is from traditional moving towards the optimal, which is at the top. It's more dynamic, more automated. You want to be able to react to what's going on, and be able to. I think the key point here was overall situational awareness of your networks or your applications. All right. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pass things back over to Mike to cover identity lifecycle management.
All right. Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, kind of continuing on with the memo, the M2209, it also addresses ILM, right? Identity lifecycle management. So it's a core identity service to protect federal data. As with our real identities, our digital identities follow a similar process from creation all the way to retirement. So ILM is foundational to managing access control. And just as hardware and software have a life cycle, so does the user. This is sometimes expressed as the joiner, mover, leaver. A user will join the system based on agency requirements. The issuance of a PIV card, for example, aligns with the joiner event, and then they move, meaning that they might change positions, right? Requiring them to get their access updated, and then the end of the cycle is they eventually they're going to leave, and then so then you need to retire that access, close their accounts. This joiner, mover, leaver process is governed by agency policy, and it's critical that as one changes jobs or leaves, that those permissions are managed properly. So then there is an ILM playbook. OMB M2209 also mentions helping agencies achieve a centralized identity management system. The intent being to ensure an agency has visibility into all identities that they control. The ILM playbook helps agencies plan, create, and maintain a master user record for all agency users at the enterprise level. There's a four-step process that agencies can use to implement ILM. The first step being document the purpose and goals of ILM, and to do that in their policy, you need to go ahead and create or architect a solution. Then you need a master user record that aggregates all the digital identity attributes, their entitlements, accounts, credentials, and whatever other associated information. And then the fourth step is to integrate ILM into the agency enterprise services. So agencies should use the playbook as a template to fit their organizational structure, their mission, and whatever additional requirements they have. But let's see, there's a link down at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and paste this into the chat as well. I can get my mouse to work. All right, just in case you're interested in checking that out. All right, so identity and access management. with the CDM Agency Dashboard, CyberArk and SailPoint are some additional tools that the dashboard uses to collect and manage that type of data, identity and access management. I think most agencies are using that. Some agencies might be using something else that's very similar, but CyberArk handles the access control policies for agency devices. In addition to collecting that IdAM data, SailPoint helps to maintain those master user records. In the chat panel, just out of curiosity, what are some things that you think might be included in a master user record? For individuals. I'll just throw out one thing. Let's say obviously you're going to have their name, person's name in the master user record. Yeah, some contact information, location. So yeah, anything regarding that goes with the person, the name, organization, maybe what position they're in, the training. I think Miriam posted there as well. Yeah, and Michael, yeah, y'all got it. So SailPoint also acts as what's called the PDP, or policy decision point, and this is where once it's been implemented, it makes comparisons to with respect to desired state versus actual state of the IdAM data, and we're going to actually have some examples of that in some of our upcoming labs. So it's actual state, desired state, that's what you want it to be and what it actually is, and making those comparisons. Okay, so back to the graphic we saw earlier. It shows the types of data that are maintained in the master user record, and it shows the relationships of that data. As we mentioned, they're all interrelated. It starting with trust, and then once that's been established, you can provide the CREDs, and then that you want to require behave. For example, training. Make sure that they've done the training they need to have that access, and then once they have those, then you give them that access, give them the privileges. So yeah, I think that's pretty standard process for everybody. So there's and you'll see it when we get to the CVLE, but in our CVLE we have a supplemental documents folder in there with some stuff, but in there we have a CDM access request document, and it's a good example of kind of what we're talking about. So be sure to check that out. It requires signed forms from supervisors or somebody else in the management chain. It requires a certain level of training for which you have to provide certificates of completion, and once that's done, and administrators grant access according to their role or need to know. But it's just an example, or a template that you can use if you need it, and you can take it, modify it, make it your own to fit your agency's requirements. So that is in again our supplemental documents folder in the CVLE, and I'll point that out when we get to that. So one of the intended outcomes of identity and access management in the CDM program is enhanced risk management, right? Everything security folks, it's all about helping to reduce risk, and the goal of the CDM effort is, with the dashboard, is to help with this. And by proactively addressing maintenance and trouble issues, we can tackle a lot of those worst problems first. and by using the dashboard to regularly monitor and maintain our systems, we're better able to move from a compliance-based approach to where we are more proactive and threat-based approach. So yeah, with this so far, yeah, that kind of does it for a lot of the instructional piece before we move into the lab. So just to kind of do a quick recap. So we talked about IdAM. Actually, I want to have you give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I got 4 statements. If it's a true statement, give me a thumbs up. If it's false, give me a thumbs down. So this first statement is, IdAM assures there is a strong authentication mechanism in place. Is that true or false? Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, yep. That is correct. So yeah, it's a true statement. If you remember, Adrian talked to that authenticator assurance level. So if every organization kind of follows that, depending on the the level and their needs, and for the system access, make sure they got the right level of authentication. Next question is IdAM provides accountability. Is that true or false? Yep. So yeah, again, that's true. We within IdAM we have that CRED and PRIV pieces of it. So those help with providing accountability, so we can see. Next question is, IdAM enforces the concept of least privilege. True or false? All right. Yeah, looks like everybody's in agreement. So that is true. That's where the PRIV piece comes in, and you only give them enough privilege to do what they need to do to accomplish the mission, to do their job. And then the last one is, IdAM is based on agency policy and procedures. True or false? All right, good job. Yeah, there's there's guidance, there's the memos, there's all that's out there, and then each agency can take that and shape it into however they need to. But it's hard to establish a good IdAM process if you don't have the supporting policy to go with it. So, all right, now it's time for the fun to begin. And I'm sure you've been having a lot of fun up to this point, but all right, lab exercises. So what we're going to do now is going to take the next few minutes to demonstrate the login process to our CVLE. Hopefully, I know we did have quite a few people yesterday on our tech checks, but then there were also some that weren't. We just want to make sure before we start the actual lab exercises that everybody who wants to participate today, that you're able to get into the CVLE and get to the CDM Agency Dashboard, so you can do each of these labs for practice. So let me go ahead and kind of show what that process looks like. For those who are already on, let's go ahead and just take a 10-minute break while we're going through this login process. If anybody might have a might not be able to find their password or something, or needs it reset, just let us know, and one of our team members will reach out to you in a private message like I mentioned earlier. All right, let me, in case y'all don't have this, here is the site to the CVLE. So that is a clickable link in the chat panel. Go ahead and get to that point. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so hopefully everybody sees my screen okay. You went to that site, the lms.edgesource-training.com/Moodle. Again, that link is in the chat panel. So once you get here, top right of the screen, click login. You got two options. You have your DHS smart card login. So if you are if you're with DHS and you have a PIV card, you can use that. If it's your first time using the smart card, though, you will have to still do your initial login with the username and password. So everybody's username is going to be the email that they registered with, and then the password. So those should have been emailed to you. You should see that from the CVLE administrator. So we do ask that you, if you didn't get it, you check your junk mail folder to make sure it didn't get filtered to your junk mail or maybe other folders that you might have. And then if you can't find it, just let us know. All right, so we do have two-factor authentication. Once you do log in with your username and password, I'm going to go ahead and select login with DHS Smart Card, and you can see the next screen that comes up is enter verification code for confirmation. So that will be a 6-digit PIN that will get emailed to you. And then we ask that you give the system a few minutes to populate that. And I'm sure if we have several people kind of hitting it at the same time, and again, it depends on the filters at your agency or your organization, and as well as network speeds. Yeah, so I'm still waiting on mine actually. But once you I'll go ahead and talk to it, but once you receive that 6-digit PIN, let me make sure, okay, mine just now came in. So you'll receive that from CVLE-no-reply@edgesource.net, and it'll give you a 6-digit PIN. So you can just type that in, or you can copy and paste, but we just caution you if you do copy and paste, because there are some other characters surrounding it. Just make sure you copy the 6 numbers and not anything extra. There's also a link, and if you click on the link, it will actually just take you directly into the dashboard. So I find that to be the easiest, instead of copying and pasting or having to type it in. So I'm going to click on the link, and it should take me right in, which it just did. All right, and so you'll have a couple ways to access, either down the left-hand side or the middle of your screen. Find the CDM 201 IdAM using the CDM Agency Dashboard course, and go ahead and click on it. And then that is going to get us to our page for this course, where we house all the information specific to this course. So you can see we have the 5 labs, what the objectives are for each of those labs. Here's where you also can download the slides, get the lab guides, which you will need the lab guides at a minimum if you're going to do the labs with us, and I highly recommend it. And then earlier I mentioned the supplemental documents. Here's where you can find those supplemental documents. I just clicked on it so you can see that CDM access request that we talked about, as you can use it as an example, but we got acronyms glossary. If you want to know the groupings for CDM, you know, if you're curious where your agency falls, you can find that there. Some information on the zero trust maturity model. Yeah, just some good information for you to check out at any time, just to enhance what you get from this course. Next is the student range. So this is actually where we want to be for the labs. And so you click on this student range link next to, I don't know, it looks like a piece of paper and the globe or something. But click on that link. And so then that takes us to the student range. And then when we're in the range, we need to go ahead and launch our image. So click on launch and range. But take note, there is another set of credentials we'll have to use. And the username is Elastic, all lowercase. And then password is password with a capital P. So click launch and range. And I don't think I'm going to have to do it because I was already logged in, but to the dashboard. But just to let you know, that's how you get to it. So then click on dashboard. And once you see that, then this is where we will begin our first lab from. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for the moment. And we'll give everybody about 5 more minutes, you know, finish logging in, making sure everybody's at this stage. And then also if you need to take a quick break, refresh your beverage of choice and use the bathroom, whatever you got to do. And we'll get started. So in about 5 minutes, we'll come back.
Hey, Mike,
And again, yep.
1 second, because I see someone just posted. Well, I guess we can. I noticed someone just posted regarding the getting to the user's overview dashboard. Let's see here. I think the navigation panel. I don't know if you want to just show them real quick if they're already starting. I guess for those individuals who haven't.
Yeah, so we're going to cover that. So just so everybody's aware, what I plan to do is this first lab, I'm going to walk through the entire lab with everybody, and you can click and follow along. You know, I'll try to pace it so that gives everybody time to kind of do the same things. That way we're all on the same page. And then the last 4 labs will let you, you know, that'll be all on your own, and we'll do a debrief after each one. And there's usually about 2 or 3 knowledge checks at the end of every lab. But as regarding that navigation panel, so there are a few slight differences between our lab guides and what you see in our actual lab within this our dashboard within the CVLE. So we are currently on Cabana version 6.1, and we know that 6.2 is coming out right around the corner, so we'll get things updated to that, and we'll make sure all of our lab guides kind of mirror that. But there might be a few slight differences, and I'll show you that as I walk through this first lab. But regarding that one, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, because it said that it was going to be at the, so it's not floating. It will be down here at the bottom if you scroll all the way down. But there is another piece, I think, on step 11 where it says to click on the user's overview dashboard, but it's actually doesn't even show up. So you just have to hit the back button on your browser. All right, but we'll talk through that, or I'll show you as we go through lab 1. Oh, I see. No, I wasn't sharing that yet. Kind of just talking through it, but when we all kind of get started here at the same time in another minute or two, I will share out my screen and walk through each of the steps of the lab. Thanks. All right, I guess it is time. Let me go ahead and share out my screen and we'll start together on this first lab. All right, hopefully everybody sees my screen okay. Let me roll back up to the top here and let me go ahead and pull up the lab guide as well. All right, so we should all already be through step 2 and now we are at step 3. So we're gonna start with, oh, I see what you're saying with that, the user's navigation. So yep, so the navigation, it is down at the bottom on step 3. If you're going to use the navigation panel, it used to, the prior versions, it used to be floating, so it was always accessible at the bottom of your screen. No matter how, if you scrolled your screen, it was always static on top. But now we actually have to scroll down to the bottom of the screen. And so down at the bottom over, you can see there's a users tab, so that will get us to the overview, users overview dashboard. So go ahead and give that a click. And you can always tell that we're where you're at by the breadcrumbs up here at the top. You see we're in dashboards and then we're in users overview. Make sure you're in the right spot. And then we always have to, in anything you do, you got to make sure you have the time filter set appropriately. So with the time filter, you can, it gets as granular as the last 30 minutes. But that's assuming that, that's in the live environment. Unfortunately, we're using, well, not unfortunately, it's the fact that we're using our lab environment. We are trying to make it a little more dynamic, so the data is changing, but not every 30 minutes. But in order to make sure we grab all the data that we have ingested, we just try to make it simple. So we just say last 1 year. And to do that, click the drop-down menu here. You can do it multiple ways. You can go up to the top and select, you could do last, change this to 1, and change days to years. But there's commonly used, which is the easiest way, and you can just select the last 1 year from here. If you've used it in the past, you can see I got some other date ranges and time ranges, and you're gonna need to reuse it. You don't have to recreate it. You can just go back and go down to the bottom and use the recently used. But for today, we're just gonna select last 1 year. And you give that a few seconds to populate. All right, so hopefully everybody's had enough time to get to this point. And yeah, so first thing is on step 5, we're gonna look at this user type and user status, so you can see overall how many users there are, and this is across every organization, every boundary out there. And then you break that 17,685 up. You can see individually what those are here in this circular chart. I don't know what the actual name of the type of chart it is, but that's what it is. If on any of these panels you're curious what it is, there's a little I right next to the name up top, and if you hover your mouse over that little I, I'm assuming it's for I is for information, just making a guess. But you can see here, this says count of user by type, which includes contractor, government, non-person, the government agency. And then each type is broken down by the status, the user status. Okay. One of the other things to point out in all these panels and charts is that you can also apply a filter by clicking on any of these active spots here. Like, you know, if I was curious and I wanted to see narrow it down to all of these inactive users, government inactive users, I could click on this and it'll say, select to apply filters, and I want to apply government and inactive. I would just hit apply, and you can see now our information has changed across all these panels, all the panels that need to be adjusted anyway. So there's that 2,076 users, and we see just the government inactive, and then that will be also filtered down through these other ones, list of users. But we don't want to do that right yet. So the way to clear out those filters is to go up here to the top. You'll always be able to see what filters are applied at the very top under the KQL syntax filter area. Just click on the X to the right of it to remove it, and we'll remove both of those. Yeah, so a lot of good information in there. These overview dashboards are just a quick way to kind of get an overall idea, and then from here you can start filtering and honing in on whatever data it is that you want to find out more information on. All right, and in step 6, that's the focusing over here on the right side for users by organizational unit, by OU, and then by system boundary to the right of that. And you can see we got all the, HQ, DHS, CISA, CBP, whichever one. So if you click on one of these, again, that's going to filter all the information to that specific organization. And the same for the boundary. The example that it uses is to select a CBP organization just to see it filtered on that. So CBP is down towards the bottom. If we click on CBP, you can see that that takes us down to just under 5,000 users, and it's only on CBP, which looks like they are system boundary 16. But again, we're just going to go ahead and remove that filter. And hopefully everybody was able to follow along. Try to give a little time. Then next, we're looking at a couple of other panels that are below those. So we got the CRED status type over here on the left, status and type, and then the account status and type. And it's a different way to look at the information. So, down the left-hand column, we have in the CRED status and type, we have agency other, biometric, CAC card, unknown, user ID, password. And you can see that they've highlighted the unknown because, one, that's something that we should always kind of be concerned about and looking into. And then down at the bottom, you see whether it's expired, issued, pending, revoked, or suspended. And then same thing over here on the right-hand side. And again, the same concept. If you want to dive into any of these, you can click on it and that will apply the filters. But I think you got the gist of how that works. All right, so then we have step 8, which we're scrolling down and we see this list of users. Just want to make sure I didn't apply any filters yet. I need to remove. So there we have 274,000 documents for list of users. That's quite a few to have to scroll through. But that's where filtering comes into play for specific information. One of the quick things to note is to apply quick filters is if you hover over any of these areas and you get the plus and the minus, the plus will create a filter for you. So this is user first name. If you wanted to filter for all the Jessies that are in every organization, you can hit the plus and then it's going to filter for all the Jessies. And that's just a quick and easy way to do it instead of having to go up here, and we're going to show you how to do that in a bit, but you can add a filter this way as well, just not as easy. So with, I think it's with step 9 here, we're going to click on the top one, or it says actually any of the blue links, but I'm going to go ahead and click on the top one. So under user ID, you can see it's blue. It's a clickable link. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And so what that does is it takes us now to the user details dashboard, and it's filtered on that specific user, the one we just clicked on. And if you go through this dashboard, you can see there's a lot of information about that user. And we said don't concentrate on what we have in the user ID on how that looks. I guess everybody's is probably going to look different. This is our training data, so this isn't actual data. Some of it's, all of it's pretty much made up data so that we could do this training. But you can see all their details, their email, name, phone number, job title, their what their status is, all the information you need to find out about a user. And then you can see they have their CRED details, PRIV, behave, trust, all that type of information that we would want to see. And let's see, so that kind of takes us through step 10. And I'll give you all a second just to make sure you have enough time to look through all that. And then when we get to step 11, this is that part where it said to click on the navigation panel and click on users again. But this is one where if you scroll down to the bottom, there isn't that panel to access. So what we'll need to do to get back is just hit the back arrow in your browser. So that's the easiest way. See, that took us back to the user overview. Okay, hopefully we are all back on the same spot, the user overview. And then for this next piece, there is a scenario that we're going to run through. So the scenario says one of the recommended mitigations of the SolarWinds breach was to identify newly created privileged network accounts in the DHS network. In this scenario, we're going to use the master user record data to view view to discover privileged network accounts that were created within the time period of November 1 of 2023 through November 15th. We're going to use this Discover tool to make a customized query to address the scenario. All right, so that's kind of the reason we are going to be clicking on looking for specific information on these next few steps. So step 12 has us go to the Discover tool, and to do that, we click up here on the top left. We call it, well, within our team, because we're all foodies, we call it either pancake stack or hamburger. But the three lines up here on the top left, and that takes you to the main menu for the dashboard. But if you go down to right under the analytics section at the top, there's a Discover, and that's what we want to click on. All right, and you give it a second to populate. And then in step 13, it says click on New. And one of the reasons that we recommend you click on New is because that if there happen to be any previous filters that were applied, it'll just get rid of all the filters so that you know you're starting with fresh data. So click on New. All right, so we know we're starting fresh. Okay, step 14, we need to change our data view. And so because we're looking for user information, we need to we know we want to be in the master user record, and we need some current information. So that is the CDM underscore MUR underscore current. Oops. So you can just scroll. You can either start typing it in the find a data view, and it'll start populating with you know, as the more you type, it'll start matching. But I am just going to go ahead and scroll down. So CDM MUR current, you can see that's right here. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. All right. And the way it came up for me, I actually want to add some fields to this, and it didn't populate down that left hand side, so you might have to click on the show sidebar. I think typically it automatically comes up. I might have closed it earlier, but you want to make sure that you can we want to add these fields so we can start narrowing down all this data that's in each of these documents. We don't need all this information. So in step 15, we have, what is there, six fields we want to find. So count creation date is the first one. And so this top section, it's called popular fields, and you can see we have these fields, and those are ones that have been used the most often and recent. But total, you can, if you see all the available fields, there's 116 fields for the master user record. It's a lot to have to scroll through and find. So in this case, if it's not in the popular fields, then we're going to probably need to go up to the top to search field names and start typing it out. But first one, account creation date, that's in my popular field, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. Next is account status, and that's there as well. And to add them, just click the when you hover your mouse over the field, it'll bring up the plus in a circle. So just click on that, and that'll add it. And you can see as I'm clicking on those, it's adding it to adding these column headers. Next is account type, and I have that one available. Organization ID, that one's right here. user first name, that's right here, and then lastly, user last name. And so I have all my 6 fields, and just, I don't know, just to show you an example, because some of you may need to do this. I'm not sure what yours looks like, but I'm going to say organization ID. If I wanted to kind of hone this down, I just start typing organization, and you know, it actually down here in the available fields, it came up to the top. But you know, the more you start typing, you know, if I select .I, yeah, you see now we're down to 2 fields, organization ID or organization is CFO Act. But anyway, just to give you an example there, in case some of you might need to do that. Give y'all a second. But then the next step on 16, we're going to add a filter, but doing it, you know, not the easy way like what I was doing earlier, where I just selected the plus to filter. We're actually going to use the add filter button. All right, I'm going to assume I can't actually see the chat panel, but hopefully everybody's at the same spot. So yeah, 16, we're going to add a filter because we need to add these dates, you know, as part of that scenario, the 1st of November 2023 through the 15th. So click on that blue add filter, and you're going to see we need to select a field, we need to select an operator, and then select a field. So we're looking for account creation date, and that should be at the top because it starts with an A. You could also, again, you know, just start typing and till you see what you're looking for. So go ahead and put account creation date for the field. And because we're looking for a date range, if we had we were looking for a specific date, we would say is. But because we're looking for a range, our operator needs to say is between. So select is between so we can, and then you see how that changed our options over here. Now it says start and end, and the system knows that because we're looking for a date, it knows what type of data we're looking for. All right. And then when we put the date in, the system will accept multiple ways. You know, you can put month, day, year, day, month, year. You can use dashes. You can use, you know, it'll recognize pretty much everything. And actually, you can see in the text there, we show 11/1/2023, and then I just hit tab, and then you can see it all. Fill in all the information how the system likes to see it. And then 2023. Oh, I'll do this to show you that it will accept multiple ways. So 2023, 11, 15, and then return on that one, or tab on that one. Okay, so there's multiple ways that you can input those. We're not doing it for this class, and this is one of the newer things that they've added, and probably, yeah, and it's not on the screenshot. So this looks a little different than the screenshot. Kind of mentioned that earlier. Some things were going to be slightly different, but if we wanted to add another filter, so this was, you know, this filter had multiple filters in one, we could just add another one here instead of doing, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 individual ones. We could do it all as one if we wanted to. All right, so once we have that information, go ahead and down to the bottom right and click Add Filter. You give it a second, and now you can see where you can see that just to verify up here that that filter has been applied, so we can see it has been, and we can see that we've reduced our number down to 802 hits. But now we need to go ahead and add some more filters so we can further reduce this down, right, based on our scenario. So in 17, we got 3 more filters that we want to add. So account status is enabled, account type is privileged network, and organization is DHS. So again, we're going to do that by we're going to go ahead and create these individually. So go back up to the add filter button, and we want to do account dot status is enabled. So I'm just going to account dot status. Operator is, and then again, the system knows by what you selected. So account status is, and then it's only going to give you these options based off what you selected over here. So we want enabled, and then add filter, and then we're going to add another filter. This one is account type. Oops. So start typing it and until it shows up. Is the operator, and then now it's going to be filtered for account types, and we want privileged network. So select that and add filter. And you can see now we brought that down to 56 hits. And then we got one more filter we want to add based on our scenario. We're looking for within DHS organization. So let's add that. And that will be organization ID. And I just typed ORG, and I can see that towards the top of the list. Organization.id is the operator, and we want DHS for our value to select. Then add filter again. All right, so we've added all the filters, and we've narrowed it down to 3 hits. All right, and that, so again, let me go back up to the scenario, which was we wanted to narrow it down to those dates and find the privileged network accounts, and that was all because of that SolarWinds breach. So we see within DHS we have 3 enabled privileged accounts, and so that's how we would find that information. All right, so now we have the tech, I was going to say tech check, but it's the knowledge check. And there are a few questions on there. Let's just go ahead and work through those together as well. So in our knowledge checks, you're not going to find a specific answer because, as I mentioned earlier, our range is it used to be static, so we could say, okay, here's what the answer should be. But now we have a more of a dynamic range environment, so those numbers will change periodically. So we don't try, instead of having to update our lab guides every week, we're just kind of making this more generic, and which means that you could also use these knowledge checks in your own environment to practice with if you're authorized to look for certain information. So the first question in the knowledge check says, how many privileged network accounts were created and enabled within DHS, within the date range for the scenario. And so we already know that number is 3. So not really a whole lot to do on this one. So we had three hits. Question number 2 says, how would you determine the number of enabled privileged local accounts that were created at CBP in the time period November 16th through November 30th? All right, so we have we have everything we need up here. We just need to make some modifications to it. So first thing is it says CBP, and we know we're filtered on DHS. So let's just go ahead and modify it. To modify it, go ahead and click on this filter, and then you will see an edit filter option. So you click on it, click edit filter, and then we just change DHS to CBP. So hit the drop down menu, find CBP, click update filter, and we see our information changed. And then also it said privileged local. And so we're in privileged network, so let's go ahead and edit that one as well. Click edit filter. And so let's click on privileged local and hit update filter. And now one other thing, it doesn't list it in the steps if y'all are looking in the answer key portion, but we need to change those dates, because before we were looking at November 1st through November 15th, but it actually says November 16th through the 30th. So let's go ahead and edit this date time frame as well. So we can easily just click on, I say easily, you can click on the dates here. So I'm just going to overwrite this the 1st through with the 16th. And then I'm going to change the end date from the 15th through the 30th and hit update. And we can see that just to verify that we have November 15th, 2023 through November 30th of 2023. We have all the right filters applied, and our answer is 2. So that was the number based on those filters. Question number 3 says, reporting your findings for the 2 questions above, answer the questions below. So, we started out today kind of saying, think about who, what, when, why. And this is just, there's no right or wrong answers for these questions. It's just to kind of get you thinking about it. So who says it's identify the person or role who will receive this information and data and initiate the remediation. So again, that's dependent on your agency and your agency's policies and processes and procedures. The what, so create a suggested remediation plan to change the actual state to make it match or get it closer to the desired state. Again, it depends on the organization. When, identify a time frame or tolerance period for remediation. And then why is identify the risk associated with this scenario in order to inform the person receiving this report. Also include how this data will be reported in the federal dashboard. So no right or wrong answers on those, just something to get you thinking. And then the last one, number 4, from the user's overview dashboard, how would you identify the number of enabled privileged network accounts in the CISA organization. So we need to go back to the overview dashboard. And so to do that, go back to the hamburger, click on the user's overview at the top, and that takes us back to the user's overview dashboard. So once we've navigated to this point, there's a couple different ways you could do that. I'm just going to go over here under users by organization and find CISA. And it's up here towards the top. And as I mentioned earlier, we just click on it to apply that filter. So we're applying CISA. And then for account status and type, which is below here, account status and type, we want to do privileged network and enabled. So you see privileged network and then enabled, cross-reference these. So enabled privileged network, we would click on that and apply those filters. And that gets us that information. That's how you would do it. All right, so that completes this first lab. Hopefully, let me go ahead and stop sharing. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Adrian, I see that there were some people with questions. Was there anything that I need to address, or we good? Otherwise, we'll start on lesson 2 or lab 2.
Hey, Mike, can you hear me?
Yep.
So there were a few, I think, more general questions. Rosella had a question regarding question 19. I don't know if you saw that one.
No, yeah, I couldn't see.
So it says if you remove the account.status filter and to look for locked disabled accounts.
Question 19.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, Rosella, in regards to question 19.
Oh, so in the lab guide, it just says discussion question. I kind of skipped over that, but it says, how would you ensure that each of these privileged network administrators actually need access, or if there are those that need access that are not on the list? Yeah, so that's kind of going back to the whole process that we kind of talked about earlier, the trust and everything. So, but yeah, that's a good question. I think it's the actual state versus desired state piece, and we have some lab activities that's kind of going to show us that. To say, okay, these are the people that should be authorized, and then when you find the information in the dashboard to say here's who currently has it, and then you kind of compare those lists and see who shouldn't have access. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and start on lab 2. We'll do 15 minutes on the clock, and from here on out. So first one I wanted to do with y'all. I know we have people with varying degrees of experience with the dashboard. Some are very new, so I wanted to at least kind of walk through that. Plus the fact of the there's some little nuances with our lab guide versus what we see in the lab here. So hopefully now everybody's got a good feel, and from here on out it's kind of on your own, and we'll do a quick walkthrough at the end after. So for this next one, we'll give you 15 minutes, and then I'll come on, do that quick walkthrough and discuss, go through the knowledge checks, make sure everybody kind of did it right, and then we'll go on to the next one. All right, so 15 minutes on the clock, and we'll see you back then. All right, hopefully that was enough time for everybody. It was a pretty short lab. Did kind of, some of the same stuff we did on the first one. Hopefully there wasn't too many issues. Let me go ahead and share my screen out, and let's walk through these steps real quick in the knowledge checks. So we go back up to step 1 here. Same kind of thing. Well, first I want to start off with scenario. Hopefully everybody had an opportunity to read through the scenario first to kind of explain kind of why we are looking for some of this particular data. But so scenario is the GAO report has just identified a weakness in the DHS OIG office's process for reinvestigation of users' clearances. Your agency requires all users have some type of clearance, whether it's a public trust, secret, or etc. Using the Discover tool, first identify all users who currently have an expired investigative trust status, and then once identified, determine how you will report your findings. All right, so what you see on the screen is I've already kind of pre-baked all this. We went back to the Discover tool, selected new to clear out any of the previous filters we used from, for example, that our first lab, we created some. So I know whenever I went back in to kind of preset this up, all those filters were still there. So if you got to click the new to delete the previous filters. And we want to be back in the master user record, which we were already there, so you shouldn't have had to change that. But and then we had 5 fields we needed: organization ID, user last name, first name, trust expiration date, trust status, and trust type. Hopefully you were able to find those okay. Again, I've already kind of pre-done that, so you don't have to see me select them. One thing I did want to point out is that I know in my fields, it wasn't easily accessible, so I had to start typing it out. But say, for example, I were to go to trust creation date, right? And then you might go, oh, where's, you want to go to the next one. Well, if you always want to get back to the entire list, you can just click the X up here, and that will take you back to the entire list if you needed it. Also, if you just do just the, those last 3 are trust expiration, trust status, trust type, just do trust anyways to get you to a shorter list, and you can see that narrowed us down to the 11 fields and makes it a little easier to find. All right. So let me go ahead and remove that. I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way now. Give us a little more screen to view. So next, it wanted us to go ahead and create some filters. So we need, based on our scenario, we need organization, the OIG organization. And so the easiest way is if you spot it down here, you can click the plus, or you can the other way is to add the filter, select organization ID, the operator is, and select OIG. But I like the path of least resistance, so I'm going to go ahead and just click on the plus to easily add the filter next to OIG. And then, so the next thing was we need the trust status expired. And I don't know if there's an easy one to do here. I do see that there's authorized. So one easy way I like to do this as well is, even though I'm looking for expired, just to help me create the filter, I like to I'll just select authorized, and then I'll go in here and edit it and just change this to expired. So there's multiple ways that you can do this. I could have just went up and hit the blue to start from the beginning, but I don't know, I find it quicker. And then we're looking for investigative for our type, and there's one that's easily findable, so click the plus there. And you'll notice that when we have applied all the filters, up at the top, as we mentioned earlier, you can see which filters are applied, but also you'll know that they've been applied because you'll see the columns, the data in the columns turn yellow. So that's how you know they've also been applied. And in step 6, it says to make the query easier to read, click the drop down arrow next to the right of the trust expiration date. So here, and we want to sort old to new because we're kind of curious about, the older the expired. Typically, if you have to have a method and you're going to pick one off at a time, you want to start with the oldest one and start working your way. So that was a fairly short one. And then we have the knowledge check questions. And so the first knowledge check says identify the number of accounts across all organizations that have investigative trusts that are expired. So we have investigative expired, but we are filtered on OIG. So, but we want across all. So I'm just going to click the X next to OIG to remove the filter. Another way you can do it is if you click on it, you can say temporarily disable if you think you might need the filter again. So I'm just going to go ahead and click temporarily disable instead of removing it completely. It does the same thing. All right. Question 2 says, if the contractor organization is removed from the search, how many investigative accounts are expired across all remaining organizations? So for that, you would have to have contractor is not, right? So I have it removed right now. If I want to do that, I can hit re-enable and then edit filter and select, instead of is, we want to select is not. But just note that when you do that, you'll have to reselect the value again. And we're going to select OIG. And I need to, figure out how to scroll over so I can hit the apply. Maybe. Sorry about that. I was trying to see. Let me, if I minimize things. There you go. I just guess I had it blown up too much, too big. So I'm going to go ahead and hit update filter. And here we go. So that now we have 72 hits, documents. Question 3, how many investigative trust accounts in the contractor organization will be expiring in 2024? So we know we need contractor for organization ID. So let's go ahead and edit filter. And it's on is. And we want to make that contractor. Number 2 says edit, or step 2 of how to do that is we want to edit the trust status filter from expired, is expired to is not expired. So let's go ahead and change this, edit filter, and we got is expired. Let's change that to is not expired. And update filter. And then we need a trust expiration date here. So I think it's going to be easier just to create a new filter. And we need the trust expiration date. And we know we have a date range, so we want to select is between. And then just like we did on the first lab, put that date range. So January 1st of 2024 to end of the year 12/31/2024. So of this year, tab, and apply filter. So this is all the ones for 2024 that are expiring or have expired. Oh, I lost. Oh, did I? Is investigative update filter. I don't know why I lost that filter. All right. For whatever reason, that one is not filtering. So I'm going to assume me temporarily disable, re-enable. Oh, yeah, I got the investigative. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing. Yeah, I wanted this to be as expired. Or is not expired. Okay, sorry, I got off on a wrong track there, but so it's not expired. So these are all the other categories: investigative for contractor, and we have 127 hits. And then again with question 4, the who, what, when, why. Again, it's just getting everybody to kind of think about that as far as, you know, who would you send this information to in your organization? You know, when it comes to tracking this remediation, your supervisor, whoever in the chain, and then, you know, what, you know, how, you know, let them know what the path for how to get this remediated. You know, maybe you're going to start with the oldest to newest. Whatever that process is, when, you know, how long you think it's going to take, and then why, what kind of risks are there associated with it. So kind of letting leadership know. So that concludes the second lab, and let me go ahead and stop sharing. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Adrian to cover the next several labs.
Thanks, Mike. All right, so as Mike mentioned, what we're going to do now is going to keep the ball rolling. We're going to jump right into the third lab, which is in regards to anti-phishing. Same type of process. You go through, create your filters, and then going to put 15 minutes on the clock. After that 15 minutes is up, I'll come back, debrief, and we'll move forward as we get through these last 3 labs. All right, everyone, let's go ahead and take a look at lab number 3. But before we do, I was just curious, how many people, you can just post in the chat or give me a thumbs up, can tell me if this is the first time you're actually having any hands-on experience with the dashboard? Oh, wow, actually quite a few. So this is good. I haven't seen a lot of questions, so hopefully you're able to follow along. So feel free, make sure you ask questions if there's something that we come across and there's some issues. Because this is your opportunity. Someone posted in the chat that our training environments of the sandbox will be available to you until Friday, so tomorrow at 4 p.m. So definitely make sure after today's course, you can go back in tomorrow, you can go back in this afternoon, this evening. It's available 24/7, so make sure you take full use of it, get some more hands-on experience, even if you want to kind of just show your coworkers. If you're in the office, you can show that environment to them. I do ask that since we do trust you and we're providing you those creds, that you behave appropriately while you're in the environment. But I don't think we have any issues with that. But yeah, like I said, just make sure you go back in and make use of it. All right, now let's go ahead and get started with lab number 3. Here we are with lab number 3. And so this one actually focuses on behave. And we have a scenario, and that scenario, I'll read that quickly here. So scenario states, your organization, DHS-FEMA, completed its first anti-phishing campaign and conducted a test of its users. The initial test revealed that approximately 27% of the users clicked on the links embedded within the test phishing email. The CISO is now asking for a monthly report of all users who have not completed the anti-phishing training. In addition, the CISO is requesting a review of all policies and procedures regarding anti-phishing in the agency. All right. So it's a kind of an eyesore there. And so what we're going to do is go back into the Discover tool. So I'm going to go ahead and click this. Let's see, we're kind of later on in the day, so I'll say the hamburger icon here, which we call the navigation drawer. Go down to under Analytics, go to Discover. Now, if you have anything saved, like you've seen in the past, just go ahead and click New to start fresh. This is my first time. I don't have anything saved, but and then from here, we need to go into CDM _mirror current data view. And so I'm already there, but just so you can make sure you're in the right one. Select it from the data view drop down or data view selector. And let's see here. And so we're picking this data view because it's related to master user records, which we'll be using to pull up user information for the behave capability within the dashboard. Here we're going to go ahead and add a few fields. So they want us to add the organization ID. And as Mike mentioned earlier, if you've used these fields previously, they become stored within this data view. They become stored in the popular field section. If not, just search by the search field names box here, or just use the scroll. And as you can see, there's 10 popular fields that are available to me, and then obviously here on available fields, there's 116. But the first one we need is organization ID. Next, we want user dot last underscore name and user dot first underscore name. There we go. Next, we want to behave dot expiration underscore date. That one's not available, so I'll go back up here. behave. And once I type in, I have a match for that syntax or what I've typed. And I want expiration underscore date, behave type, and then behave.status. All right, so I'm going to expand my table here. Now that is a few fields. As you can see, organization.id identifies the organization. So these are all the values under that field. User.last underscore name. Obviously, that's the user's last name, and same thing goes here. User.first underscore name. These are the first names for those user. We have a behave expiration date, and so we'll look at that in just a minute. But this is when that actual training expires. Behave type. So is it within the agency? Is it some type of CSAT? Whatever category that it's in. And then lastly, the behave.status. And so in this case, we can look at all the values that are there, but obviously pending, expired. I can't remember all of them, but we'll take a look here in just a moment. So those are just want to explain some of the fields that you're seeing, because there's within each data view, there's hundreds of fields available. And it just really depends, because these same fields won't be available and possibly won't be available in another data view. All right, we've met that requirement for number 4, if you're following along with me. So step 4. All right, next, we need to narrow our results. As you can see, there's over 274,000 documents, right? This is too much to report on. So we want to refine that list of hits. The first thing I want to do is we're going to create a filter for organization.id, and they want it to be equal to FEMA. All right, I don't see FEMA listed anywhere in the top results, so I actually got to manually populate this one. So I'm going to click the plus sign for the add filter, and then select the field section, the type organization, or org, and then find organization.id. For the selected filter, I want is, because I want an exact match. And then for the value, I want FEMA. All right, once you have it, I think this is one of the things that have changed in this release in 6.1. I think in the screenshot it says the save. Well, now they just say add filter instead of save. They do the same function though. So I'm going to click add filter. All right, so we've gone from just over 270,000 results to 19,000, right, by adding that one filter. Next, we're going to add a behave type. And so I'm going to go to click filter, the add filter button again, right here in the blue plus. Field, behave, that type. So again, operator of is. And for the value, I want fishing. And you can see all the other ones that are available. Like I said, I couldn't remember off the top of my head, but you can see the options are agency other, some type of certification that's required, or CSAT, knowledge, role training, but we want fishing for this exercise. Once you add it, go ahead and click add filter. Wow, now we're just under 1,000. We're just over 500. So 688 hits. All right. Now to create the last filter, we're looking for those users that did not participate in the anti-phishing training. And so we'll have to create a filter for the behave.status field. All right. And so we're going to do behave status. And click add filter. And instead of using is, we want to weed out, and there's actually two options we're going to use. So we're going to use complete and pending for this filter. So we want is not one of. I'm sorry. So we're going to use we're going to exclude completed or pending. So is not one of, and then the values, it'll let you select multiple values. So we don't care for completed and pending. So the only thing we should see are the individuals who have expired training are incomplete. All right, because we're saying we don't want to see anything that's completed or pending. Add filter. And obviously, with the dashboard, there's multiple ways to be able to get to that answer that you're looking to for your report. And so we're showing you one way to do it. You could have gone the opposite way as well. All right. So looking at that, that will leave us with the behave status of expired and incomplete. So that's the only values we should see now. And as you can see, there's 349 documents related to that. Now at this point, we can save this report. So if I go to save, give it a unique name. I'm just going to say phishing 2024. And you can give a description if you want. Once you have it all saved, let's see, actually, I'm going to say lab 3. Save. Once it's saved, it'll give you an indicator here, indicator message here in the bottom right. Now, if necessary, you could also print the report by going to Share, CSV Reports, and then generate a CSV. Now, this may take a little minute. Once it's finally created and downloaded, it should pop up here. There it goes. Let me down. There we go. All right, so if I open it up, it's going to save it in Excel. I don't care about that. But at this point, outside of the dashboard, you can manipulate all the fields or the values and provide this report to, I think in this case, it was a CISO. And maybe you can do a monthly. So this would be the report for May. And then you can do it again, run that same report because you've saved it, and run that report for June at that tab here. So now you have the reports that you're keeping track of, and you can provide the percentages and track it that way. And so that's just a quick way you can generate that information and manipulate it to pull it out outside of the dashboard. So that might be helpful for you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this out now. I don't need to save it. But hopefully everyone was able to work through that one. Now let's talk about this knowledge check. All right, so the first question asks, or they want us to identify how many FEMA users have expired anti-phishing training. All right, so what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to delete some of this, some of the filters we have in place now. So I'm gonna delete this not behave.status just to make it easier. And all I want is expired. And so earlier for the filters I've created, I've gone through and utilized the add filter button. For this one, I'm just going to click on expired within the document table. And so click the plus sign next to expired under behave.status. It'll populate it here in the add filter section. And as Mike mentioned earlier, anything that's yellow lets you know that there's a filter being applied, and you can see that it's been updated. So we can see that there's 170 FEMA users that have expired anti-phishing training. All right, question number 2, how many FEMA users have incomplete anti-phishing training? And so, very easy, just go to that behave.status expired, click on it. When you click on it, you have the option to edit the filter. All right, so we want behave.status is, and instead of expired being the value, we're going to click the drop down here and click incomplete. Once you have that, just update that filter. And you'll see this populate. Now, instead of expired, you'll see incomplete. You can see we have 179 users once again within FEMA. All right. So once again, it's just a matter of knowing what you're filtering for, knowing the fields and the values to be able to create your reports. And once again, we could then save this information to incomplete training. Question number 3, or knowledge check 3. determine how many FEMA users had incomplete anti-phishing training that expired between the last 30 days, or that expired within the last 30 days. All right. So with this one, obviously you got to kind of know what you're talking about, or you know what the fields are. In our table, we have behave.expiration_date. So this lets us modify a certain time period, right, of when the training expired or whatever the value is that you're looking for. So we want to keep incomplete because that's what they're still looking for. We're going to keep FEMA. Obviously, we're still looking for phishing. But if we go to add a filter based upon the behave.expiration_date, so if I go into add filter here, and I click on that field. And so for the operator, instead of is, I want in between. So is between is the option we're looking for. Now this one gets a little tricky because it doesn't give you a drop down. So you actually have to know the syntax. And so this case, we're going to say, 30 days from today, and I'm just going to use April 30th. So 04/30 of 2024. I'll put that's my start time. Doesn't matter as far as the time, just the date is all you need. And then in, you actually have the option, even though it doesn't show, of using now. And the same thing from the beginning. You could do now until a certain time frame. And so that's one thing they incorporated and makes it a little easier versus, you can also type in today's date as well. And so the preview here lets you know if there was an error here, it would let you know. Let's just say here. I thought I gave you an option to. I thought it gave you an error message. I guess not. Okay. Well, anyway, with this being the case, now is an option. So I'm going from the April 30th of 2024 until now. And once I click add that filter or add filter, it's going to update. Let me know there's 8 documents related to that. And if you look at the dates, you can see that they all are within that time frame. So from May 2nd all the way up to May 27th. All right. So that answers or satisfies knowledge check number 3. And then the final knowledge, well, actually, we got 2 more. So knowledge check number 4. Identify the number of users that have incomplete phishing training for the OIG organization within the next 30 days. All right, so we're going to go the opposite direction. But first, what we need to do is change the organization ID. So instead of FEMA, we're going to click on it, the filter, edit the filter. Organization ID is, instead of FEMA, we're going to click the drop down and select OIG. And then update filter. All right, so that's one thing. Next, we need to modify the behave.expiration_date field. So click on that, edit the filter. And instead of, like I mentioned before, instead of having a date here, we're going to do now until a certain time frame. And I'm going to use June 29th. So that's what, 06, 29, 24. And it's going to populate it to the format it needs once I click away. And we're going to just click update filter. All right, and we can quickly see that there's 13 documents related to that. So there's 13 individuals that will be due in the upcoming 30 days. All right. All right. Now this last knowledge check is in regards to reporting. And so these are just questions you based upon the scenario. So the first one is who? Who would be the person or role you will receive this information and data, or who will receive it and then initiate the remediation? Or just take a guess. really no wrong answer. I was gonna, yeah, cyber training, your training manager, executive leadership, maybe the ISO or CISO, depending on who needs to get this information, right? I think in this case we're reporting it to the CISO in this scenario, but directors, okay. Good job. All right. Okay, let's go move on to the next one here. Now it says create a suggested remediation plan to change the actual state to make it match or get closer to the desired date, our desired state. So our desired state is what? What would be the desired state in regards to people being not having the training complete or expired training? I guess is the issue at hand here. So if you haven't completed your training, what would you do to, what would your remediation plan be to resolve that? Do you tell the managers, have a plan to link access control log into training stats? I've had that happen to me. When I was in the Air Force, when you logged in, if you hadn't completed your IA training, your yearly IA training, it automatically redirected you to the IA page, and you could not log in or access any of your resources other than just logging in. You couldn't go to the internet, couldn't check email. Let's see, remove from network within a period of time to redo the training. Good. Keep that idea of period of time because we're going to talk about that next. So, all right. But yeah, link access control, log into training status. All right. Maybe limit their access. Identify the individuals. Okay. Next, C. So 5C. I think that Mike asked, this comes in line with that. Identify a time frame or tolerance period for remediation. So what's a good amount of time to get them, the individuals, to get their training complete? A week? 30 days? 3 days, okay. All right. And then let's go ahead and keep going here. We have the last one is why. Identify the risk associated with the scenario in order to inform the person receiving this report. Also include how this data will be reported in the federal dashboard. Let's see here. So what is the risk if these individuals continue to have access to log in and they don't complete their training? Human error. Well, I think the whole goal of this was to make sure people are training, right? We said that there was a 27% chance or 27% rate of people clicking on links. Well, maybe they haven't completed their training, so they didn't know, right? And so at that point, they say, well, I can't be responsible because I haven't completed the training. I didn't know. And so if they've completed the training, now they're responsible and they should be aware of what's going on, right? And so that's what's key here. I think that's a big risk. You want to make sure everyone is informed. Training is a big aspect of anyone's organization, right? And that's why you're here today, to get training on the dashboard and how it can be utilized in a lot of these capabilities. And so if you don't know how to use the tool, or if you don't know what training is available, then you get that link that says, hey, you just won $5,000. Click here to accept. Or you get a phishing email in regards to, hey, this is the help desk. I just need you to verify your credentials. Click the link. Those kind of things. To try with the next speeding ticket. Exactly. But you would be surprised on how many people use that that excuse. But yeah, you can just, like I said, the goal is just so you can kind of see how this can be utilized and possibly make things more efficient. Gone are the days, hopefully, of using a document to track all this information manually and try to populate, especially with organizations having thousands upon thousands of, not 10,000s of thousands of people working with them. You don't want to have to keep a local Excel sheet or some type of Word doc, and one person manipulates that data every month to have everything updated, and you got to go through your supervisors. Hey, who completed the training? Send me an email so I can update the sheet, that kind of thing. Well, this will track it automatically. That's the part we're trying to get at, be more dynamic and report that information back to you. And so then you would just go in a dashboard and pull the information out. So, all right. Let's go ahead and continue on. We stop sharing.
All right. Yeah, got 2 labs left to go, and they're pretty short, and they follow kind of the same, a lot of the same that we've done for the first 3 labs here, a lot of the same process, but looking for different types of information. So you should be pretty familiar with it now. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and read off what the scenario is for you. The scenario is headline news this morning. Phishing attack compromises the user IDs and passwords of user accounts at agency blah, blah, blah. As a result, the federal CIO issued a data call for all agencies to identify accounts with the ability to log in using a username and password. DHS wants to start with their contractor support staff. They also asked for a review of all user authentication policies and procedures. So there we go. Yeah, and with that, I guess we'll put up 15 minutes, and I'll come back and do the debrief after 15 minutes expires, and that should be plenty of time. There's not a lot of steps. Might just take a little time to get through some of the knowledge checks. All right, and we are back. Let's go ahead and do a debrief. As you had noticed, repetitive kind of actions, looking for different information. As we talked about earlier, and we showed you the slide that had the user in the middle, and then we have the CRED and PRIV and trust and kind of everything leading to that user. So, since we're looking for all these, it's all going to evolve around this master user record. And so that's why we keep using that same one. And again, for this one, we had the scenario. Let me go ahead and share out my screen while I'm talking. And so yeah, our scenario again was that user ID and passwords were compromised at a certain agency, so kind of makes all the other agencies want to say, hey, let's go ahead and look at ours, make sure we're not compromised as well. So DHS wants us to go ahead and start off by looking at our contractor support. And yeah, so that's kind of the driving reason we are looking for some of this information. So again, we went to discover. In our drop down, we're looking for the master user record current. So we have that selected. It had us step 2, select new, and that clears out any of the previous filters. So all that's already been done. I'm kind of doing like John did earlier, where I kind of pre-baked some of this stuff already, so you don't have to see me select it all. It had us select those certain fields, and they're listed right here. You can also see here on this top section, it says selected fields, so you can kind of see them a little easier here as they are cut off in some instances if they're long over on this side. There's also the available, you see there's 108 available fields. The more popular ones that have been used recently or frequently are in this blue area at the top. And so a lot of times you can easily just find it right there, select the plus. And if it's not, you can go to search field names, like I had to do that for the CRED expiration. And then once you start typing it in, it'll populate when you have enough letters that match, and then select it from there. Another thing to, once you've got all your fields, if you want to minimize this left-hand area to maximize the space here on the right, you can close this by, you see this left-facing arrow and 2 lines on the top and bottom. Just click on that, and that'll minimize that over there for you. And if you need it back, you can just click on it on the right arrow now. All right. So those, yeah, organization ID, because we need that, right? Because we're looking for the contractor organization, users, last name, first name, credential type, credential status, and credential expiration date, and then the user status. So those are the things we need to help answer the question back to DHS. On step 5, it has us create a filter, add a filter. Actually, there's 2. So if you're looking at just the image, it's only going to show you the one, but it's the same process for, because we need organization ID, contractor, right? So 1, you could do the shortcut way if you were to find it down here. You could also click the plus. One of the things that I like to do, just because I find it easier, like I go to organization ID. If I don't see contractor easily accessible, I just click on the DHS one. Say, for example, I'll just take one at the top, and then I'll hit edit filter, and then change this to what we want it to be, contractor. It's just another way to do it instead of starting from the beginning. And then we needed CRED type, user ID, password. So again, CRED type, I'll just do that, edit, user ID, password, and then update filter. And then we know we're filtered when they're highlighted in yellow. So we have those applied. And so you can see that. You can scroll, there's a bunch of different options if you wanted to sort, or if you decided that, it makes more sense that this CRED type column is all the way to the far left, you can move these around if you need to. Just some little extra tidbits information. I'm not sure if John kind of covered some of those things or not. And so that was it as far as the steps. And then it's back to the saving off your search. And I know John talked to on the previous lab, so I won't go into a lot of detail there. That way we can all get out a little earlier too, but a lot of just repetitive kind of stuff here. And then let's go ahead and get to our knowledge checks. So the first one says, using the report you saved in step 7, determine how many active contractor users are using user ID, password, credentials to access their accounts. So we're looking for, we need user status is active. So let's filter for that. We'll see that easily available right there. And so we can see that there are 90 active accounts for contractor in the contractor organization. And then so question 2 says, how many active contractor users with user ID, password, credentials have a CRED status of issued? So we just need to create a filter now for issued. So we can go look at CRED status, scroll down a little bit. So I see one there. So we'll take the easy route. Click the plus to add the filter. And we can see it's highlighted. So that filter is applied. We could also see up at the top all the filters that are active right now. And then our result is we have 17 users, contractor users with that are using user ID and password. Question number 3 says, of the active contractor users that are using user ID password credentials, determine how many have a revoked or suspended CRED status. So we go, since we're only filtered on active right now, and it's asking for one of revoked or suspended, we need to change this. So we could cancel it, create a new one, but that's more work than necessary. So we just need to go in and edit this one right here. So yeah, you would right click, edit, user status, and then we want to say is one of, so that gives us the option to select multiple values, and then we want to select revoked as well as suspended. Oh, you know what? I did the wrong one. I meant to do CRED status. It's a good thing I didn't delete that. CRED status is one of. I was wondering why the fields weren't correct. That's another good way to know if you're kind of in the right spot, because the values that that are available will only apply to whatever field you selected. So it's the CRED status. You know, any of these fields, like if I went to account ID, account name, it's only going to show the fields that are applicable to that field, or the values that are applicable to that field. So anyway, values, revoke, what do we say, revoked or suspended, and then suspended, click off of it, update the filter, and we have 39, and you can see under CRED status we have revoked and we have suspended accounts both listed. All right, question 4, how would you determine the number of active CISA users with user ID password credentials that have been revoked or suspended that expired in the last 90 days? So first keyword there is active CISA users. So we need to edit our organization ID to CISA from contractor. So let's go ahead and edit contractor, change that to CISA. And update. And then we need to create that, you know, since we're looking for expired in the last 90 days, we need to go to CRED expiration date. So I'm just going to select one of these, and then I'm going to edit. And then I need to change the date range, right? Because this isn't the right date range. We're looking to, or from the last 90 days. So let's just say, no, this is February 15th. So let's go November 15th of 2023. 11/15/2023. And as John mentioned earlier, one of the shortcuts is we can just say now, or we can put in today's date. Easier to put now. And so that leaves us with 3 hits, and you can see those are between November 15th and now. All right, and then question 5, and this is the same ones we kind of answer or ask on each of these labs. So same thoughts, you know, just to kind of spur you on to thinking about who would you typically report this information to, what, you know, when, what kind of time frame would there usually be, and those are the things that would either be directives or it would be in your policy and procedures. All right, so that is that, and we got one more lab to go. And again, it's the same type of information. And I think because it is repetitive and we are running up on our time, instead of 15 minutes, I think we can do it in 10 minutes. What do y'all think? So yeah, let's go ahead and put 10 minutes up. And you don't need to worry about going through the procedures of saving it, and yeah, just go through those steps and do the knowledge checks. All right, we are live again. Yeah, so on this one there was a scenario again. This one was the CBP account that was an expired administrative CBP account was used to gain access. And the director's asking for a list of CBP administrator accounts that are revoked, expired, or suspended. And he's also asking for an updated policy and procedure document regarding the handling of these accounts. So you have to generate a weekly report. Anyway, so same kind of process we've done with the other ones. Again, discover, select new to clear out all the previous filters. A lot of the information is the same, except this time we're looking at PRIV information. And so the same process, we're looking for organization ID, user last name, first name, PRIV type, PRIV status, expiration date. And so we can, as I mentioned, we can move this over, give us a little more space to look. We add a filter. We want organization ID is CBP, and this one, I'll just go ahead and do it this way. So type in organization ID, I see it right there. You start typing, is CBP, add filter. And we see that the filter has been applied. And then it mentions in the PRIV types. So if we go PRIV type, I'm just going to go ahead and do this and edit. And then when you look at the PRIV types, you can see there's a bunch, but one of these was tricky as far as the unknown and agency defined. The unknown, that's actually not in here. So yeah, let me go ahead and select these. And so to select multiples, you have to do is one of, and then we want them all except for that agency defined one. And so I won't go through all of these. Update filter. And we can see that all the different ones are there, with exception of agency defined. And then the focus of our next filter is accounts that are suspended, expired, revoked. So that is going to be in this PRIV status. And so we want to add a filter there. And we're looking for, so we need to change to is one of. And we're looking for suspended, expired, revoked. And since unknown is not there. All right. And then says to review the results. And we go off and we save our search and save the report. So let's go ahead and get to the knowledge checks. And the first one says identify the user with the oldest PRIV expiration date. So oldest PRIV expiration date, find that column, sort old to new, give it a second to work, and then we can see this top one, this MFA administrative account for Matthew Baker is the oldest, which was November 27th of 2022 was when it expired. Question 2, within the CBP organization, how many SEC admins have suspended, expired, revoked, or unknown accounts? So we just create a filter for PRIV type SEC admin. So let's go ahead and filter there. And so that brings us to 134. Determine how many CBP users with sysadmin privilege types have suspended, revoked, or unknown accounts that expire in the next year. So suspended or revoked accounts. So we need, we're looking for sysadmin. So let's go ahead and make sure we have that selected. So sysadmin, let's update that. The status, we need to go ahead and remove expired from our status. So edit, let's remove expired, update it, and we'll drop down to 71, and then we need to create, we're looking for that time range that for the ones that expire in the next year. So this goes to the question asked earlier, can we do now till sometime in the future and save that off? And yes, we can. But so our PRIV expiration date, and let's edit that. And we'll say now to 2024 0215. Whoops. And update filter. I guess it helps if I change the year to 2025. All right, so that's all the ones that are coming up. I did notice though that it has this one with the March 7th date on it, so I don't know why that comes up, but remember that our data here and this is our training environment, so we got little quirks in our training environment, but I don't think this top one should be there. But so that completes that. Go ahead and stop sharing. So with that, let's go ahead and press on. All right, so with this slide, we kind of give you a glimpse of what's kind of happened over the last several years when it comes to CDM, and we've come a long ways, right? But there's a lot more to come. Hopefully, we'll get a newer graphic to put on here that kind of shows more into the future. We'll get that up soon, but the roadmap here just illustrates that progression. And even though there's a lot that's been accomplished, and there's more to come, we're trying to move that needle to get us to that threat-based response posture. And the dashboard is just continuing to evolve. We're learning. They got plans for it. We're taking in your feedback from the courses, taking feedback from operations, and we're going from that service-based delivery model to, or actually from kind of that one size fits all. So that's going to be, better in the long run for everybody. And it aligns with the broader CISA charter, which is to provide on-demand cyber services for agencies. But yeah, the most notable thing is that it's just going to evolve, going to improve. So yeah. All right, here's our takeaways. And so we went through that little exercise. When you get a repairman or something to your house, kind of, correlating that with this trust, behave, CRED, PRIV piece. So hopefully everybody's got a good understanding of that. Kind of went through the desired act and actual state, the policies and procedures, and then how to kind of to mesh those and see where that delta is, using the dashboard. We, in our lab exercises, kind of showed you how to use the dashboard to find the data, how to, we had some good scenarios there, somewhat relevant scenarios, and how to use the dashboard to wean down the data, because there's large amounts of data out there to get the data that you want, using the date, using the things to narrow down our searches. But hopefully you now have a better understanding of IdAM and how you can use the dashboard to help reduce the attack surface, and the trust, the capabilities of trust, behave, CRED, and PRIV are all foundational pieces of identity and access management, and each one of them relies on the other to provide an effective means to manage your user base. It also is imperative, right, that agencies have policies in place. So it's good to be familiar with those policies, and to follow the policies and processes for your agencies. But so that's kind of a quick recap, and then with that, I'm going to hand things back over to Adrian to kind of close this out and talk about some of our other training resources that we have available to you.
All right, thank you, Mike. One thing to note before we close out today's session. So I was given guidance. Looks like based upon the guidance I was given, that we're going to go ahead and extend the access to the environment until Tuesday, and it appears to be we're going to just use 4 p.m. And I was just informed that the range is now back up. I'll tell you, technology, right? You can't control it. So for those anybody that worked into the IT fields and you've had to troubleshoot issues and things just start working miraculously for whatever reason, so the range is back up. Unfortunately, I don't think we have enough time to get back into the range today, but you do have access until Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. So make use of that. Go ahead and go back in and pick up from lab 4 to the 5th lab. They're short labs, shouldn't take you any more than maybe 10-15 minutes, hopefully 20 minutes at the most. But you can go ahead and go back and complete those up. So the range is back up. All right. Training. So on the screen, there's some of the training that's listed that will be available over the next coming weeks, in some cases months. But I want to just briefly give you an opportunity to take a look at this. I'll, in just a few moments, show you where you can register for upcoming courses on the CISA training site. We'll also take a look at some other training and CDM resources that are available on FedVTE, including the CDM microlearn videos that you see listed on the left side of this slide. I'm sorry, on the right side of the slide. All right. And so for those who downloaded the slides, this may not be available to you. So like I said, I'll show you the CDM training website where you can take a look at some of the upcoming training as well. All right, so before I get to that, how many of you feel a little better about the dashboard now that you had a chance to, obviously take part in this content that we delivered and get a chance to do a few of the labs today? How many people, if you can, give me use the party horn. Oh, so Simon didn't say use the thumbs up. But thumbs up for work as well. There we go. All right, well, great. Because that's what we're here for, right? We want to make sure that we're delivering courses that are beneficial to you. And once again, when you get a chance to provide us your feedback at the end of today's course. But one of the questions we always ask is, now that you've had this training, where do you go from here? Right? What's the next steps? And so we recommend that you continue to get familiar with the CDM Agency Dashboard. As with anything, the more time and practice you put into it, the more familiar and comfortable you will be with using it. You get more familiar with the fields and the values. Once again, I was speaking to someone on a personal chat, a direct message, and we were talking about some of the fields and values, how they can get a document that lists some of the more familiar fields, and so we'll talk about that in a moment. But in regards to training, we also offer a variety of training courses, including a 2-day instructor-led classroom presentation, so on site, as well as courses like the one you've attended today. So if you can attend the on-site course, you get to see our beautiful faces in person. But not only that, I think something that's even better than that is the fact that you get to network with people from other agencies. All right, and so definitely, if you're in the area or if you can travel to the area to take part in that, take advantage of that opportunity. Now, since you're registered in this course, you have the opportunity to subscribe to the CDM Agency Dashboard training program through Gov Delivery. You'll receive notifications about upcoming training, so you definitely want to subscribe. And so here I'll provide the link. I don't know if anyone else already put it in the chat yet. All right, let me put that here. One moment. So that's the subscription link if you want to be in the know. We've already talked about the cyber range. So once again, that's available until Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. So take a part of that. Now, what I'm going to do next is provide a quick demonstration of our training and resources website for CISA, CDM training and resources, and the FedVTE site, which holds where we actually have all of our training available. So already recorded sessions. All right, so let me start sharing actually. All right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. What we have now is our CDM training website, and this should be available on the slides if you download them as a reference. But on the site, we give you some background information on what CDM is, its goal, some of the capabilities available for you. Many people ask about the codes or the numbering of the classes, or each one of the topics that we focus on. So under the CDM Dashboard Cyber Range Training section, it lists each of the courses. And so someone mentioned a while ago, what's the code for the 2-day course? So we have a few of them. But the first one is the CDM 111. This is more for our beginners. People want to get a background on CDM and the dashboard. And so that's the 111 course. It's 2-day. And if you click on the plus sign, it gives you details on what you're going to be covering. Disregard the ES5. We're currently in the process of trying to get that updated on the website, but it should be ES6. So the most recent release of the dashboard, just like you had today. But these are some of the things we talk about. STIGs, we talk about reporting. We do more in-depth concepts associated with filtering and understanding some of the visualizations that are available. We don't really talk about the visualizations in this course. We kind of get down to the nitty-gritty and go into the Discover tool, which isn't as graphic as the visualizations, right? And so that course is available. It's a 2-day course. Very great, very good course. Now, if you can't do that and you want to be virtual still, we have our 100 level series, 200 level series, 100 being new to the dashboard. So take a look at all these. Like I said, you can expand them all out. And then much like our 111 course, which is on site, we have remember correctly, it's this one here. Where's it at? Yeah, it should be this, the CDM 222. Correct me if I'm wrong, everyone. It's similar. So it's more advanced, still on site, but an advanced course. All right. So 111, more of the basics, teach you what a filter is and how to utilize those. The 222 is more advanced, right? We'll get into more topics in relation to cyber defense and how the dashboard can utilize the report on a lot of information that you need to report to. All right, let's keep scrolling down. We also have the option, you can take a look at some of our microlearns, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But upcoming events. So as you can see this is for May. So if you look here, you can see from June 6th all the way up until June 25th. These are some of the courses that are coming up. All right, so if you want to take part in that. And so if you find a class, right, let's just say if I want to register for the June 11 course, CDM agency-based dashboard role-based training. If I click on the CDM 203, hopefully it'll come back. There we go. Click on the course, you have the option to register. And so you just fill out the requirements of what they need, the email address, all that information, and you'll be signed up to register. And so if there's availability, you will be in the class and you'll receive an email, much like you probably did for this class as well. So these are available to you, and this is where you register. So just click on the actual course name over the next coming weeks and months. All right, pretty easy, straightforward. All right, so that's our CDM courses. Now let's take a look at Fed VTE. This does require you to have an account. So you'll need a Fed VTE account, which is very easy. I think for people that actually government employees, you just need to fill out the actual register link, fill in the information, and they vet you, and then they get back to you. Now, if you're a contractor supporting the government, you can have an account as well. They just vet you. Usually someone, your team lead or the core over the contract will actually have to just vet and say, okay, this person should have access to Fed VTE. And that process, I think for me as a contractor, it took maybe 4 hours. So it's fairly quick if your supervisor's around and they send it up the channel. But once you have an account, you're going to click login. So let me just log in. And one good thing about this, I'll tell you this while we're waiting for me to log in. There's not just CDM courses or microlearns. There's also other cyber-related courses that are available for you in different topic areas, and so you can do a search and try to find some of those courses. Not going to get into the details of that, but if you click here, cybersecurity courses, you can see what other courses that are available to you. But for our courses, you go to the CDM courses, and then we have microlearns, which I'll talk about first. Scroll down, and it lists all the new microlearns. As you can see, if it's a new one that's just recently been added, you'll see a new indicator message here, or notification. It lets you know about how long it is. So if you click on the description, it'll tell you how long the course is. So this is 20 minutes. And so our microlearns are meant to be under 20 minutes or less in most cases. We're just short snippets of a topic area. So in this case, FSMA automation with the CDM dashboard. We're not going to go back into the weeds of what the dashboard is. This is strictly for you to understand how FSMA automation can be performed with the CDM dashboard. Then once you have it, you just click start course and it'll populate, and then you can it's self-paced. So let's just say you start one today, you can resume it tomorrow or next week. So as you can see in my courses here, where I say resume course, I can pick up where I last left off. So I don't have to go all the way back through it or try to fast forward until the point that I was at the previous time I watched it or viewed it. So it'll show you in progress. It shows you the skill level, right? So these are all of our courses. So if you haven't seen them before, please take a look at these. They can be very insightful, especially if you're looking for a specific topic. So those are the microlearns. I go back. Actually, I can just go here. Our CDM Dashboard Elastic courses would be the other option in regards to CDM, right? And so these courses are much like what you've just set through today. The content piece of a class that we delivered that's been recorded and posted to Fed VTE, right? Each one of the courses are available to you. You can do the same thing like I mentioned before. You can start a course, resume it at a later time. It tells you how long the course is. Now, the one thing that you miss with these courses, we don't have access to the range environment. So that's the one thing. You still get to hear our beautiful voices. You get the wonderful content piece of it, but you don't have access to the CVLE and you don't get a chance to do the labs. But if you don't have time to dedicate 4 hours or 2 hours, constant hours to a class, this is another option. And so this is something that people can do. And like you're sitting up late night, you don't have anything to do, and you're dying to learn more about CDM. Here you go. And so you can take a look at our some of our training that's available online through FedVTE. All right. So that's the skinny on that. All right, thank you, Mike. Hopefully everybody saw that. So the CDM 111 is a 2-day course, and then there's a CDM 222, which I mentioned earlier. That's a 4-day course. So it's the whole gauntlet information. So if you got about a week to attend, definitely take advantage of it. Like I said, not only do you get to see our beautiful faces, you get the wonderful content, but you get to network. And so you can talk and discuss different issues that you've had or things that you resolved or how great the dashboard is working within your organization with other members or your peers in the industry.
Hey, Adrian, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
But yeah, I was mistaken on that CDM 222. So that is a 2-day course
Okay.
as well. But I know the last time we did CDM 111 and 222 in tandem. So that turned that into a 4-day course. So I apologize. It's actually a 2-day course.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, clearing that up. All right. So two-day courses. So like I said, the 111 is more, I would say, a basic level. It gives you the background foundational concepts of CDM, and then the 222 builds upon that and goes into more advanced topics. So either way, you're more than welcome to sign up for either course. Just realize that the 222, if you don't have any CDM experience, it might be fast-paced. All right. And I do say sign up early because it's limited. I think we're only allowed 20 bodies in the room. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, or anyone else in the staff. And so you figure you want to sign up early and quickly as they're become available, you want to sign up. All right. So those are training opportunities, and once again, that are available to you. Next. And I think I was speaking with someone offline in a private chat regarding our knowledge base, but the knowledge base is where you can find information on current and upcoming version releases and enhancements. There's things like release notes and install files are available for downloads, more of the technical jargon that you would want to hear about in regards to the dashboard. And so you can also search across all release documentation, including updates, to find what you may need. All right, so now the access piece of this. So from my understanding, you still need to submit a request. And so let's see here. Let me send this out. I don't know if this is let's see here. Make sure I have the right. I think it's still this what we see on the slide here. So if you need access, you can contact them by sending an email to the address that you see on the slide. And you can also check with your agency CDM POC, and they can also help with the access request. Once again, I think someone mentioned earlier that they wanted more information about all the fields that are available, right? I mean, we make it easy because we're using particular fields and we're telling you what those fields are, but there's hundreds of fields available. And so there's a document that they maintain that shows you all the fields, and I think they have it organized between each data view, and that's available on the knowledge base. So if you're into that, you want to know more information about that, that would be very helpful. Or you can reach out to your POC to get access to that. All right. Next, we have POCs. All right, so right off the back, if you have any CDM dashboard training questions, right? Let's just say you leave today, you forget to download your certificate. You want to know how you can register because you can't remember, which is a possibility, right? You want to email cyberinsights@cisa.dhs.gov, and they can assist you with any training questions. You can also email our team lead, our CDM training team lead, Mr. Joseph Bukovac at joseph.bukovac@cisa.dhs.gov. If you have any program management or program office questions, you can email cdm@cisa.dh.gov. And then lastly, if you have any issues with wanting access to the knowledge base, you can email cdm.training@cisa.dhs.gov or speak with your CDM point of contact for assistance. All right, and we can help you. But with that, what I'll go ahead and do is hand things back over to our team lead, Mr. Joseph Bukovac. Joe, the floor is yours.
Oh, great. Thanks, Adrian. Thank you, everyone. And I want to thank everyone for attending. I also want to thank Adrian and Mike for doing another great job. All our instructors do a fantastic job passing along the information to you. On behalf of the training team, I want to thank you for attending. Have a great evening, have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you at future CDM Dashboard training events.